Welcome everybody. I'll hand over to Mike in a minute. So I'm Steve from Spike. Just wanted to say a quick hello and a welcome. I'm also going to be monitoring the Q&A and everything else that's going on in the background. So if you've got any questions, by all means fire them into the Q&A panel and we'll try and answer them. Or if you want to, we can also, if anyone's got any, would rather ask a question verbally, we can open the mics up when we get to that point as well. But I'm going to hand you over to a very smart looking Mike Forshaw, who's had a haircut especially for us today as well. So you look to see him looking at his best. And Mike's going to take us through page speed, which is something very close to our heart, particularly in the retail world. But I'm not going to steal any of Mike's thunder. I'm going to hand over. I'll go on mute myself. And Mike, take it away. Fire into the Q&A if you've got any questions, guys.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Mike Forshaw. I'm the head of performance testing for Spike. And today we're going to have a webinar on page speed. So without further ado, let's have a quick look at today's agenda. So we're going to be covering exactly what page speed is and why it matters, particularly in the retail world, as Steve mentioned. What are the trends that we're seeing in UK retailers from our own page speed solution that I'll come to shortly, some common issues and some easy fixes, and some ways to improve. So first of all, what is it? What is page speed? It's basically a set of tools and metrics that Google provide to evaluate and analyze the performance of your web pages. So you can see from the image there, this is a test that I ran a few days ago on the BBC website, and when you run it, it gives you an overall performance score, which is 85 in this case, and then some separate lower level scores for various different components such as accessibility, best practices, SEO, which is search engine optimization. You can see it works on a really simple traffic light system, red, green and amber, or green, amber, red, whichever way you want to look at it. But I don't want to get too het up in that, because you will notice that the boundaries between the various different colours, if you like, are quite large. The BBC website there has got a performance score of 85, which is really good, but it's amber. It could have had a score of 50, which is not so good. It would have still been amber. So let's not get too carried away in that. After you've run the test, it will give you a series of suggestions on ways to improve, which I will go into more detail on shortly. So in a nutshell, that's what page speed analysis is. So why is it so important? And again, we're looking at this predominantly from a retail sector because Spike work predominantly within that sector. There's some stats here. I'm sure some of you will have seen some of these before, but they are really, really important, which is why I just want to go over them again. The stats have come from Google, Amazon, and Walmart, so we're not messing around with small players here. These are real key performers, if you like. So the first stat is for every second over 3 seconds that a website takes to load, you will lose potentially 7% of your conversion rate. So users are impatient. They will hang around for 3 seconds, which is not very long at all, and then immediately after that 3 seconds, they will just start dropping off. They've not got what they want in time, so they'll go elsewhere. That's a massive impact. And the next stat there, underlines that 53% of mobile site visitors, so those are people coming onto your website from their phones, their iPads, etc., which is the vast majority of traffic nowadays, they will leave that page if it takes longer than 3 seconds to load. So if you consider the impact that is potentially going to have on you as a company, it's massive. That they'll go somewhere else, they'll buy what it was they wanted to buy from somewhere else, leaving you down in your profits. And then this next stat is the one that absolutely blows my mind. So Amazon calculated that a page load slowdown of just 1 second can cost the company 1.6 billion in sales each year. That's astounding. 1 second, the blink of an eye, and look at the impact it has. 1.6 billion pounds in sales. And then following on from that fact, Walmart found that for every 1 second improvement in page load time, their conversion rates increased by 2%. So all of those stats just really underline why page speed is so vital. So what have we done as a company to monitor page speed? So we set up our own in-house solution quite a while ago now. And in a nutshell, it runs lighthouse reports against a series of key UK retailers, big retailers. It runs overnight in an automated CI/CD pipeline, and it produces a set of results which we as a company can then analyze, and that helps us to spot various different trends that we can then report on, which I'm going to come to very shortly. So just as a brief overview of the solution, we have a code pipeline that includes SpecFlow and Google Lighthouse.net. That executes, and the results are populated into an Azure SQL database. And then we have on top of that a Power BI dashboard that interrogates that database, pulls out the various figures, and presents them in a nice, easy to view format that we can then analyze. So if I just move on, there's a quick screenshot of the pipeline in action, if you like. So as I say, it runs each night. We tend to run it in unsociable hours, so there's not anything else that can potentially affect the results that we get. So we do see a nice consistent pattern of results each time this runs. You can see there we're running against desktop and mobile websites, and more recently PLP, which is product listing pages, so we can get a really good rounded view of all the stats that we'd like to look at. So what do we get from it? What are the observations? One of the main ones, and quite surprising really, is that desktop takes priority. Desktop performance seems to still, in this day and age, be the most important, the one that people are looking at, and the ones that people are trying to improve upon. I chose Amazon here because, in my opinion, they are, well, it's not in my opinion, it's a fact, we've seen it from the figures, they are one of the best performing websites on the internet. And it doesn't matter if you take the desktop performance or the mobile performance. You can see there the overall performance scores are, the vast majority of them are 100, so as good as you can get, or just below. It's not really surprising that Amazon are so good with all the resources that they have available. It'd be more surprising if they weren't very good, and I'm sure they wouldn't sell half as much AWS space if their own performance wasn't particularly good. But you can see the accessibility scores and the best practice scores, that they're all really good. And then again, if I flick to another one of our retailers, underlining the fact again, this is Screwfix in this example, completely picked at random. We're not singling out anybody here. These are just trends that we've seen across everyone that we look at. You can see Screwfix desktop, really good performance again, all mid to high 90s. The other key components, accessibility, best practices, etc. You could argue, if you look there, the majority of it's green. Flip back to Amazon, it's still really good, mid to low 80s. But you could argue that Screwfix is potentially even better than Amazon for the desktop, which is great. Very good, kudos to them. But this is where the differentiation happens. So you can see here, this is Amazon and this is just mobile. Again, performance scores absolutely brilliant. Accessibility best practices don't really change massively between mobile and desktop, and that again is a trend we've seen across all the retailers. You wouldn't necessarily expect them to, because they're easily ported from one to the other. But then if we go back to Screwfix and we look at their mobile scores, you can see there's a massive degradation. They've gone from high 90s to 50s, just touching into the 60s, and then quite a lot of red figures as well with performance. So this just shows how much or how little, if you like, that the retailers are concentrating on mobile and how much they are concentrating on desktop, which in my opinion is quite strange when the vast majority of traffic on the internet nowadays comes from your mobile devices, be it your mobile phone or your tablets. You know, everything you want to check, your bank account, you want to look at the news, etc. You've pretty much always got your phone with you. It does exactly the same job as your desktop. You can read anything you want, you can buy anything you want. So why aren't people concentrating on that mobile performance? Moving on. So it's not just about the homepage. Again, we're finding that companies are concentrating particularly on their home pages. Now you can see here we've chose River Island in this example. Again, no slight on River Island at all. It's the same across all the retailers. The top two images there, top left and top right, desktop and mobile, both the home pages. You can see the desktop performance is for the homepage is really good. Again, it's not all green, but it's very high 80s. You can see the mobile is much less, referring back to my earlier point that desktop seems to be key. But then if you look at the bottom two images, exactly the same two websites, but we're bypassing the homepage and we're going straight to the products listing page, the PLP page for desktop and mobile. And you can see that the desktop performance is much less than the homepage. It's now dropped to the 50s, the early 60s. And again, for the mobile PLP, it's dropped down from what was already quite a low score in the 40s to now performance in the 20s, which to me is really surprising, because if you think about the way you shop for things, let's say, for example, a television, typically, if you're in the market for a new TV, you will decide ahead of time on the make you want, the model you want, the size of the screen, etc. And then you will go into your search engine, you'll enter that criteria, and you will be presented with a list of retailers that are selling that particular television or whatever it is. And you will click directly into those links, therefore bypassing the home pages, going straight into the product details pages, and you'll pick the one that suits you based on price, delivery time, etc. So you would expect these pages to be hit more than the home page, again, especially within the retail sector. So why aren't we looking at that performance of those pages quite as much as we are looking at the home page? Because potentially people are using those pages, as I say, more than the home page. So I'm waffling on a little bit about it. I think it'd be quite good at this point to show a little demo how we actually run these reports, and how beneficial they are, how easy they are to run, and the information that you can get from them. So if I just pop out to my browser for 2 seconds, there's a couple of ways that we can run these reports. The first way is typically, well, not typically, you would go to the pagespeed.dev website. You would enter the URL that you want to run a page speed test on and click analyze. You can see it immediately pulls back some of the important stats, and then it starts to diagnose some performance issues. Now, because I'm presenting, this will be quite slow. So in Blue Peter fashion, here's one that I ran earlier. This is exactly the same. It's the BBC, but it was ran yesterday. You can see here it pulls back lots of really useful information on all the various different elements of the web page, how long they took to be presented to the end user, etc. You can drill into any of these and it will open a separate tab. Excuse me, just let me see if I can move this bar out of the way because I can't see it. Can't see where I am. Yeah, so it will open up a separate tab, tell you exactly what it is you're looking at, what the in this example, largest contentful paint. It tells you what it is, what it's used for, why it's important, etc., etc. You can jump into any of these and get the same information. You get the traffic light system that I was talking about earlier. Again, you can see here the performance. This is a mobile execution, as you can see there, mobile test, I should say. the performance is low, which again refers back to what I said earlier. But this, in this instance, is potentially because we've got a cookie message that's popped up there. You can see it takes various screenshots along the way, so you can see exactly what it is you're presented with, and when various elements of the page were loaded. First contentful paint, for example, here took 1.3 seconds. That is the first thing that appeared on the website. So you might go to the page, it might be blank at first, and then you may see a banner appear, and that's your first contentful paint. And the user then knows that stuff is happening, and they're likely to hang around a little bit longer than they would do if they were just seeing a blank website that meant nothing to them. Here's all the various different as I've mentioned, the screenshots we saw before, but you can see in this instance that the cookie message has got in the way of things a little bit. As you scroll down the report, we then come to the diagnostic session that was running before that would have took a little while on the other screen. So, and this gives you really easy to implement quick fixes, if you like, so that there's no excuse to have a website that is performing slowly, when you can come in here and this will tell you exactly the ways it thinks you can improve your website. So one that stands out there is reduce unused JavaScript, and you can sorry, that's already expanded. So reduce unused JavaScript, you can click into it, you can expand it. It gives you a list of all the different JavaScript elements on the page. You can see here there's some ads on there, Google Ads, etc., etc. It tells you the size of the files, your potential savings, and there's so many things that it can suggest to you. Minify the CSS, which is something I'll go into later. Enable the text compression. That there's so many quick wins. So it's a really useful little tool. So as well as running it that way, let me just close these. There's another way of doing it, and this is beneficial for your development team, I think. So if you come into a web page, for example, here, let's go into the BBC Sport football page. BBC is in my opinion one of the best websites on the internet. It's constantly updating. There's new news, new traffic coming in all the time. It has to perform. So if you come into the website, click F12 or right click and inspect, you can then, it pops up your developer menu, and let me just move that out of the way. You can click on the chevrons here, and as long as you're in Google, you can click on Lighthouse, which runs exactly the same report we've just seen. You can configure it before you run it, whether you want it for mobile or desktop, the categories you want it to include, anything you don't want it to include. So here, publisher ads has been taken out. You can analyze the page load, and it runs exactly the same report that I've just shown you via the other method. Takes a few seconds because I'm presenting, so unfortunately it's not as quick as I would have liked. But any second now we will get that initial report in exactly the same way as we had before. But this way is really beneficial for your developers, because if your development team are testing your websites, they're going to be testing more than one page, and they don't want to be constantly plugging in URL after URL into this type of thing, where they can simply click on a link, run the Lighthouse report, they get all the stats. As you can see here, they've come back for this particular page, the performance, your other key elements, your ways to improve, etc., etc. And then if you then want to quickly jump to another page, you can just close that one down with the clear icon, skip to another page and rerun the report. Saves you quite a lot of time, especially if you're concentrating on your own company's website. So 2 ways of running things, whichever one you prefer. There's significant time savings in this method, is I think, but by all means it's your choice. So let's jump back to the presentation. Oops, there we go. And let's look at some of the common issues. So this is what we were talking about earlier, the slow mobile performance. I think I've shown you several examples there of mobile not being fully recognized as something that needs to be worked on. Another issue is poorly optimized media. So, for example, you may be presenting a background image on your website that's 100 KB JPEG, where you can get away with a 5 meg PNG that looks exactly the same, but is served so much quicker, therefore improving your performance and potentially improving your user satisfaction and your bottom line. Unminified JavaScript and CSS, I'll come into that in more detail shortly, but what this basically is when a developer is writing JavaScript, they will typically write it in a way that's easy for them to read. It will include white spaces, carriage returns, that type of thing, so they can test it, debug it, make sure it's all working. But then when it has been proven and they do know that it's working, they should be minifying it, which is basically removing all that white space, removing the carriage returns. It's not required. When it forms part of the website, the JavaScript works in exactly the same way, but it's just quicker, more efficient, and leaves you with quicker response times. And then another one is render blocking JavaScript. So this is where a JavaScript file lives in the header of the web page, and that whole JavaScript file has to be loaded before the rest of the web page can appear to the user. So if you're having large JavaScript files in the header, it's going to slow down your page. It's easy for the developers, it's neat and tidy for them, but if they can break that down into smaller files, it will increase the performance of your web pages. So it's certainly something to consider. Moving on. So how can you improve? There's many ways that you can improve, but I've selected a few here of the quicker wins, if you like, the more obvious ones and the ones that you should be looking at in the first instance. So adaptive images. This is where, as I mentioned earlier, people are looking at your websites through different viewports, from your desktops, from your tablets, from your mobiles, and typically you will just have one website that's auto-scaled for whichever device you're using. That's not ideal. That doesn't work particularly well. What you should be looking at is setting up different templates for the more common devices. In the first instance, that's slightly more overhead, but once you've done it and it's in place, it massively improves your response time. So the devs may not like it at first, but once it's been done, it's going to be so beneficial for you. So if you're on a mobile, you get a particular layout presented to you that's perfectly set up for that mobile, the same for the tablet, the same for the desktop. Second one, lazy loading. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this, but again, it's really important. Sometimes a website will be presented to you and a load of images and other bits and bats that you can't even see are being loaded. So they're taking up the time for absolutely zero benefit. So let's just display what the user can see. And then when the user wants to scroll, the rest of the images, the content of the page is loaded. The benefits are obvious. It reduces the page load time, the bandwidth, and probably most importantly, it improves the user experience. A couple more. Next gen media, start looking at that. This is relatively new, and again, it's a really easy, quick win. The images that are typically on websites today, JPEGs and PNGs, they're not particularly efficient. WebP is a relatively new format of image, designed by Google themselves. They will actually prompt you to use this nowadays. And basically, it gives you images of exactly the same quality visually to the user, but a much higher compression rate. So they're smaller and they're served quicker. Now, again, it is relatively new, but it's not difficult to implement. Adobe Photoshop, I don't know, your design teams will probably have that. The latest versions of that will allow you to load up your current images and convert them to WebP. If you don't have Adobe Photoshop, there's online resources out there that you can use where you can basically go onto a website, one of them being Photopea, and that's photopea.com. And again, you can upload your images to that, convert them to the WebP format really simply, and see some vast improvements. And then finally, we can start to look at using a critical approach to JavaScript and CSS. So this is again what I mentioned before. Browsers don't start rendering a page until it loads and parses all the resources. So this is causing problems for websites with large JavaScript and CSS files. So let's try and reduce these into smaller files, and it improves the performance time of the web page quite significantly. And then some other quick wins that you may not necessarily always think about. So let's get the developers running page speed tests in their own dev environments. So if we can get it into the mindset that every time a developer releases a new piece of code into the dev environments, integration environments, whatever you've got, run a page speed test, compare it to the previous page speed test. If it shows an improvement, then great. If it shows some form of degradation, then you know it's come from that latest bit of code deployment. It's easier to fix it. They can go in, they might have let a higher resolution image slip through. So if you get it into the mindset of every time a developer releases a significant drop of code, if you like, not necessarily a text change or something like that, run a page speed test. It's really simple, but it's very beneficial. Consider adding it to your pipelines. This is exactly what we do with our solution that I mentioned earlier. It cuts out that manual effort. It saves you loads of time, and it immediately highlights any issues. Make it part of your day that you come in the morning, you check your pipelines from the day before, and you see if there's been any negative impacts. There could be, you could have overnight code deployments, that type of thing. If you've got this page speed analysis baked into your pipelines, then it's going to be hugely beneficial for you. After the initial integration and development of the test, you can almost just forget about them, let them run, and get into the habit of checking them each day. Regular page reviews, again, this is really key. Maybe on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, go back through your websites that you're constantly adding new bits of functionality, new products, if you like, from a retail side of things. It's so easy to keep adding the new stuff, but not checking back on the stuff that's already there. Is it still needed? Is that code still relevant? Do we still need it there? Are the images that have been there for weeks, months, years, do we still need them? If we do, let's optimize them. The WebP format that I've just been mentioning. Look at your JavaScript, your CSS, see if they're outdated now. Things move on so quickly. I'm sure you're all in full agreement with that. So what was good today isn't going to necessarily be good tomorrow. So let's keep on top of things. Stay compatible with the latest technologies and standards. Again, going back to the WebP, it's a new standard, but it's a massive improvement. So be aware of what's going on out there. And then another, it sounds so obvious, but production monitoring. If you've got this in place in your production environments, it's hugely beneficial for the developers. They can keep their eye on things, and they can implement those optimizations based on real world usage, what your users are actually seeing. Therefore, you're minimizing impact on your users. You're preventing those business losses, which absolutely nobody wants. And then you're providing that constant feedback loop for the development team. It's not difficult to do. It's just an initial process, as I say, and then once you've done that, the benefits are constant and really beneficial. It should. There's no real reason why monitoring in production shouldn't be a thing. Okay, so been waffling for quite a while there. There's a lot more that could be said, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. I appreciate you all joining. So any questions that you may have, anything that's come in, Steve, would you, anything at all that we need to address?
Nothing coming in yet. Everyone's been really quiet. I think you've stunned them into silence, Mike. So with all the good content.
Well, I hope it's all been working and they've been able to hear me.
Absolutely. If anyone has got any questions, either fire them into the chat, or if you want to put your hand up, we can always open the mic as well and have a chat. Just let me know. We'll give it a couple of minutes while you have the option. Let's see if they come in. If not, obviously, big thanks to Mike for all of that. Thank you to everyone for coming as well. There's going to be you'll get a recording of this as well, and we're going to be putting some of the snippets on LinkedIn and things like that later on as well. If you do want any follow-ups as well, feel free to ping us. Just reply to the recording message when you get it. Drop us a line, and we're more than happy to have a chat there as well. So, yeah. But yeah, as you can tell, Mike's absolutely passionate about this. I think we've scratched the surface here with a lot of things we can do. But I think there's a lot more in terms of, how you can actually go from something quite basic and get the simple stuff done and then make it a bit more of a discipline. But, definitely encourage people to start small, look for those quick wins, because there's some really cool stuff that you can just get people doing, or at least get those quick wins onto a backlog and then start prioritizing them alongside all the other change. Because actually you might find that some of these changes come in as more valuable than some of the other changes you've got in your backlog.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not rocket science, and the changes are, potentially really easy for a massive benefit.
Absolutely. Great stuff. Right, everyone's been really quiet, I think, on the questions. Just so you know as well, I've put a couple of the links that Mike had there, the page speed one and Photopea in the webinar chat, just so you've got them as well if you want to try those things out. As Mike said, give it a go into Chrome, give it a whirl and see what happens. If there are no questions, as I said, thank you everyone for attending. Oh, hang on. Julian Smith, how much of this material applies to Shopify sites?
Again, it's just as important, really. If your website doesn't perform, your users aren't going to come to it, or they're going to leave it quite rapidly. So that as far as I'm concerned, this is something that all websites need to consider. There's no real reason to not consider it, because as I just said, it's not rocket science. It's something that you need to be aware of and to implement. Just run some tests, see what it suggests. There might be some quick wins there for you.
Yeah, I was going to add to that as well, because I think I've had the same question asked of me before on Salesforce, because I think there's always an assumption that, hey, you've bought this package and you're implementing your site through that, and it's a service you're buying from Shopify or Salesforce or whoever, and therefore they should handle all the performance. But actually, depending on the config, because you are configuring a platform, so many different options there. If you don't choose the right things, or if you're not challenging them to optimize it for you, if you are still plugging in bad images and things like that, it can only go so far. It does help, absolutely. It does take a lot of the pain away for that. But also we see in other more complex sites as well is a lot of the knock-on effects might be things like the design and the number of integrations you've got. So it's also going to give you information about thinking about the design. We see this all the time in retail sites where we've got loads and loads of additional plugins, like when Mike said about things like lazy loading, elements that aren't needed. There's always a temptation in every retail site to try and put everything on the homepage and trying out all the features that aren't there. So still gives you the ability to kind of think about the actual design and give you information about, well, okay, might be that Shopify's handling a lot of the things for us, but actually is it still subject to some other design constraints or integration constraints that we perhaps need to think about? So it gives you a starting point. It's not necessarily giving you all the answers. And as Mike said, it's an ongoing process, because as you change it and change it and change it, if you don't measure it, you can't do anything about it. But yeah, hopefully that answers the question, Julian. If not, more than happy to have an extended chat as well, if that's of use to you.
Yeah, by all means, ping me on LinkedIn if anyone's got any other questions as well. Cool. Well, thank you, everyone.
Anymore. I think we're probably done. So thank you to everybody. I'm going to end it there now. As I said, the recording's there. If anyone does want to follow up, feel free to drop us a line. We love chatting about this, and more than happy. Julian said thanks. So there we go. I think we answered the question. Whether we gave you the right answer, Julian, or not, I don't know. But as I said, we can always chat more. But thank you very much for that. There we go. I'll end it now, and thank you everybody for attending.
Thanks all.